Наш наступний гість буквально об'їздив увесь світ. Він був у 197 країнах зі 197. І після відвідин України назвав Київ одним із своїх улюблених міст у світі. Це Деніел Herszberg, тревел-блогер, автор проєкту Travel Insider. Daniel, hi, thank you for coming online to us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me.
So, where are you now? In which country?
I just arrived back to the UK, where I live, but I was actually just in Israel, so I just got back from Israel yesterday.
How many time you spent traveling?
About 12 years. Yeah, it's been a big project. It's a big commitment.
And what was your purpose for such many traveling 12 years? Oh my God.
I think since I was a kid, I was very curious about the world. And as I got older, that sort of turned into a bit of a project and later into my sort of life passion or life mission. I've always been interested about different cultures, different people, different histories, and that's taken me to every country in the world.
How many passports have you had?
Probably about 6 or 7.
Not bad.
Not bad. I filled them up.
So you have been to Ukraine. Share your impressions. When have you come here?
So I first came to Ukraine in 2016. I was studying for a big exam, and I took an apartment in Kiev, and I spent a few weeks there, and I kind of really sort of based myself there, and I fell completely in love with the city, you know. I don't need to explain to you, but the youthful energy, the creativity, the cafes, and obviously so much history and such a fascinating city. And then I returned to Ukraine this past October, actually. I was on a mission with an organization called the Union for Progressive Judaism. They had raised a significant amount of money for Ukraine and communities in Ukraine. And we were coming back together to basically look at some projects where the money had gone and also to start thinking about rebuilding, resettling, and where more money can go. So this past October, we traveled all over the country, from Lutsk to Lviv to Khmelnytsky, back to Kiev. And, you know, in many ways, it reaffirmed everything I loved about Ukraine. The energy in the streets, you know, even war couldn't destroy that. You know, a city like Lviv or Kiev, there's still this sort of joie de vivre, like people love life. The cafes are still full despite sirens. You know, you can tell that people are making a real conscious effort to create a new normal, and that is so admirable under, you know, the difficult circumstances we see in Ukraine.
I explored your website and was surprised to see that you told that Kyiv is one of your favorite cities in the world. What makes Kyiv one of this?
It is true. I've always loved Kyiv, and returning to Kyiv really reinforced that. I think it's exactly that sort of energy and that desire to sort of create life. When you walk around Kyiv, you see art, you see cafes are full of people, you see, you know, young students on their laptops, and that the fact that that kept going in war even more so just reinforces what a special place Kyiv is. On top of that, you have thousands of years of history. The monasteries, the squares, the river, it's beautiful. And I think it's one of those great cities that everyone should visit. And, you know, I really, when this horrible war is over, I really, you know, can see such a bright tourism future for Kyiv. And I look forward to the day when we have, you know, digital nomads coming and setting up base in Kyiv, and you know, people coming from all over Europe and the world for parties and for restaurants. And yeah, it's like I said, it's a really special place.
What have you eaten here?
I'm going to pronounce it wrong, so don't get me in trouble. But
It's fine.
I love vareniki.
Yes, вареники.
Oh, I love. And then also the potato cakes with a bit of cream on top.
Cakes with cream on top.
The like potatoes,
Potato with cream.
yeah, like potato patties, like the fried potato. And
Deadly.
obviously-
It's deadly.
yeah, of course. Oh my gosh, yes. Okay, early in the morning.
And борщ.
I was about to say, you took the words out of my mouth.
So, what have you learned about this world visiting all the countries? What new did you explore?
I think, humans want the same thing. No matter where you go in the world, whether I'm sitting in London, in Ukraine, in Israel this past week, people want their children to be safe, people want food on the table, and people basically just want to live their lives. And I think there's sort of a very base human desire, which is, it sounds very simple, but to see that in reality, to speak to people, on the one hand who are facing hardship, and then on the other hand, people who are, in countries that aren't facing war and aren't facing difficulties. And there is that common thread across all of the world's cultures and across humanity, which is really, something very special. I'm a big believer, and I write this on my website on Travel Insider, that travel should be transformational. And I think for me that, visiting every country and spending really many times months and months in parts of the world which are in many ways closed off has really transformed me to be able to see, I guess behind the headlines and behind, what we hear on the media and what we see in the news, and to be able to see a lot of places as real people. When the war started in Ukraine, I had so many friends there, and I was suddenly finding I was messaging people, and it was a lot more than just looking on the news and seeing bombs drop on Kiev. It was people I knew, it was my friends, and to have that experience in so many different places is very powerful. And I think it's one of the great reasons to travel the world, is to build these human connections and to build these bridges.
You mentioned that you just came from Israel. There was time too. Can you compare these feelings in Ukraine and in Israel?
Definitely. Very similar, very similar. Two things. One, I actually remember in Ukraine in October, many of the people we met with, they actually compared the situation to Israel. They said things along the lines of, well, we just have to get used to sirens. We just, have to get used to the fact that our life can be disrupted very randomly by missiles falling. We have to get used to the fact that our sons and children are on the front lines fighting, and this is our new normal. And at the time I thought, yeah, this does sound a lot like the Israeli existence. But having spent some time in Israel now these past few weeks, what immediately hits you in Israel is you land in Tel Aviv airport and you are surrounded by photos of the hostages. You know immediately that the situation is not normal. And there's a mood that comes with that. And it's heavy. War is heavy, right? Of course, I don't need to explain that to Ukrainians. And when I landed in Tel Aviv, I was immediately hit with the same sensation that I felt when I crossed the border from Poland to Ukraine. And I keep thinking on when we were on that bus from Poland crossing towards Lutsk, the bus was heavy. There weren't men on the bus. There were a lot of people, Ukrainians, that were living elsewhere in Europe, coming back to visit family. The woman I was sitting next to, she told me her brother had just been injured quite badly on the Eastern Front, and she was coming to see him in hospital. And that heaviness is the same. At the same time, what you see in Israel is very similar to what you see in Kiev and Lviv, where people do everything they can to spite the war, to continue living their life. So even though we have missiles, raining on major cities in Israel almost every day from both the south and from the north in Lebanon, people in between the sirens, in between running to the bomb shelter, people make an effort to go to the cafes. Or on the weekends, they've started doing like nightclubs underground in bunkers so that you don't have to leave when an air raid siren happens. And I think there's something very powerful in attempting to spite war and attempting to sort of keep living when everything around you tells you you should go and hide. And I think a very similar sensation is what you see in Ukraine when, I keep thinking back to walking in the streets of Podol, and the cafes are full, completely full of people with laptops. And I just remember thinking, I don't know if I could do this. I don't know if I could just keep going with my life when everything around you is madness. And I think that is, something very powerful we see. And I think there's a lot of similarities. And I think, in both countries, people really feel like they're fighting for their existence.
So it's a circumstances in which we should live. We haven't another opportunity and another scenario. Yeah, you have a lot of subscribers. What did they ask you about your visit to Ukraine?
The main question was, can we really visit Ukraine right now? And I published an article on my website on this, and I said, can I travel to Ukraine right now? And it's a funny one to answer, right? Because on the one hand, Ukraine's borders are open. On the other hand, it's still an active war. And my answer was, I try to give a bit of color. I try to say things like, in the West, sirens are a lot less. And, in cities like Lviv and Lutsk, to an extent, things feel normal. And I sort of explained to people that there is a way of either spending time with Ukraine or supporting Ukrainian communities outside Ukraine. Obviously, there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of Ukrainians spread across Europe right now. I said, reach out to them, see what you can do to be useful. The immediate response I got was also, a lot of support, a lot of people just saying, can I go and volunteer? Can I go and help out? And, I don't necessarily have the answers for that. I don't pretend to have the answers for that. I work in the travel world. But I think for a lot of people, the content I shared made it very clear that Ukraine is that front line in the fight for liberalism, the fight for democracy. And, the response to that was very powerful. I think people really were able to see that and really able to feel that,
I hope that they will have chance to visit peaceful, prosperity, wonderful Ukraine in the future. Thank you so much for your work and for this conversation. З нами був Деніел Herszberg, тревел-блогер, автор проєкту Travel Insider, який об'їхав весь світ, був в Україні і полюбив її.